Hello, I'm the New American's Tom Eddlem, and I'd like to talk to you today about my latest cover story, Why the 99% are being left behind in the American economy today. In that article, I debunked the leftist assumption that it's all about income taxes. More specifically, about the tax cuts on the top income earners in the 1980s and during the Bush administration. But in point of fact, the income tax burden has shifted toward the rich, not away from the rich. In 1980, before the Reagan tax cuts, the top 1% paid half as much income tax as the bottom 95% combined, which is a disproportionate amount. However, in 2013, the top 1% paid more income taxes than the bottom 95% combined. So the burden has moved toward the rich, not away. It's not about income taxes. So why have the 99% been left behind economically? And they have. Well, in my cover story, I outline 3 reasons why that is the case. The first reason is the Federal Reserve Bank. It is the greatest example of crony capitalism in human history. In the article, I outline several multi-trillion-dollar bailout programs that give money directly to Wall Street and devalue the dollar's value in what everyone else holds. That part of the story, I think, pretty much stands on its own. The second part of the story is probably the most controversial. The second reason I give is multilateral trade agreements, more specifically NAFTA and the World Trade Organization. I'll get to that in a minute. Lastly, I talk about direct crony capitalism. The federal government runs myriad programs that give billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to corporations every year, whether it be through the Import-Export Bank, farm subsidies, green energy tax credits. This part of the article could have been much more expanded, but because the print version of the New American is limited to 3,500 words, I had to cut my 8,000 word draft down to fit the space. I actually probably could have written 20,000 words on the subject matter. Let's talk about the most controversial part, or what I expect is the most controversial part of my cover story, which is multilateral trade agreements. That part of the story will probably get some of my free trade friends to accuse me of being a protectionist. I'm not. I accept the free market truism that when two parties trade, both benefit. Because if one didn't benefit, they wouldn't trade. That's not in question. But what is in question is, just because the two parties involved in the trade benefit, it doesn't necessarily mean that all of the rest of society benefits. Now, it is true that the United States consumers benefit from cheap foreign imports by the lowering of the tariff. That's also beyond question. However, there are offsetting costs when you lower a tariff. For one example, we didn't lower the tariff alone. Had that been the case, perhaps it would be a universal good. However, we didn't lower the tariff, we lowered the tariff while raising the income tax. Before the income tax, the primary means of funding the federal government was a tariff, a tax on imports. Now, it's the income tax, and there's almost no tariff. The result is, instead of hindering imports, we're now hindering workers. The burden has been shifted from imports to workers. And as a result, a number of companies have used this global free market and labor to move their factories offshore, whether it be Nike moving their factory to Indonesia, GM moving to China. And the result for foreign countries, many of these impoverished countries with low wages, has been an incredible, even historic raising of the standard of living, especially in China, India, Pakistan, and Indonesia. But the reality is there are trade-offs, and that is what my article was designed to reveal, that as the wages abroad go up because American factories are moving there, the American wages have stagnated as there has been less jobs to compete in our domestic labor market. I hope my article has given you some fodder for arguing the case that it's not about income taxes, and that you don't uncritically accept the leftist assumption that it's all about income taxes. And I hope you keep reading at thenewamerican.com and watching these videos. Thank you very much.